My name is Melissa. And the first thing you need to understand is that I was standing in a wedding dress exhibition hall the day I watched a woman accept a standing ovation for a design she stole from my hands, and the man I loved was standing right next to her, nodding like he had never seen that dress before in his life. He had seen me sketch every single line of it. He had watched me stay up until 3 in the morning getting the beading placement exactly right. He had held the fabric against the light and told me it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. And then he stood there in that hall with his arm not quite touching hers, and he let her take the bow. He let her take everything. That dress. Remember it. Because that dress is where this story begins and that dress is where it ends. And everything that happens in between is the story of what it costs a woman when she trusts the wrong people with the best thing she ever made. Stay with me. Because this is where it gets good. Let me tell you about the world I was living in before I understood what it actually was. My name inside that world was Melissa, adopted daughter of the Grayson family, taken in as a child, raised under a roof that never quite felt like it belonged to me. The Graysons had money. Real money. The kind that comes with a specific address in a specific part of town and a housekeeper who replaces the carpet when it starts looking used. The kind that makes people assume you are lucky simply for being in the proximity of it. And for years, for most of my life, I made that assumption too. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself I was grateful. I told myself that the cold drafts I felt in certain rooms were just the architecture and not the truth of how I was seen. The truth of how I was seen was this: I was an adopted daughter. Not a real daughter. Not a Grayson. A charity case with a talent for design and a quiet disposition and an unfortunate tendency to love people who were not yet ready to love me back. His name was Marcus Grayson. He had grown up in the same house, technically, which meant we had shared meals and shared silences and shared the particular tension of two people who are pretending not to notice each other. He was the heir. I was the addition. He had the family's face and I had the family's table, and neither of us had ever said out loud what we both understood, that when the moment came, the table would be taken back. The moment came. And I didn't see it coming the way I should have, because I was in love, and love has a way of making you stupid about the evidence that is sitting directly in front of you. Here is the evidence I was choosing not to see. The total dollar value of what I was giving that household, what I was giving quietly, without negotiating, without labeling it as debt, was not small. I designed the dress that launched the Grayson family's association with the fashion industry. I designed it for free, because it was a passion project, because Marcus had asked me, because I was young and in love and I thought that giving your best work to people you love was just what you did. That dress was worth, in market terms, not less than $110,000 in licensing and exhibition value based on what comparable work was selling for at the time. I know that number now. I did not know it then. Then, I knew only that I had made something beautiful and placed it into hands I trusted and walked away feeling like I had done something good. Nobody called it an asset transfer. They called it family. That sentence. Remember it. Because everything that came after made sense once I understood what it really meant. There was also the matter of $32,000 in what I will call personal household labor, design consultation, wardrobe management, event coordination that I provided to the Grayson household over the course of 4 years because it was expected and because I was there and because the alternative was to sit in my room and feel the cold drafts and know what they meant. And there was the matter of my silence, my sustained, continuous, years-long silence about things I had witnessed and things I had been told that would have been inconvenient for the Grayson family if they had become public. I put no dollar amount on that. Some things resist quantification. But I counted it. I counted all of it. And what the total revealed, once I finally had the courage to look at it clearly, was not a family relationship. It was an employment arrangement in which I had never been told I was the employee. The full number, when I finally added the last line, was $158,000. Across 4 years. Not counting the silence. That was their first mistake. They forgot that the person doing the counting was me. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the morning that changed everything. I was working. I am always working. That is the thing about me that people use and the thing about me that saves me, in the end. I was at my drafting table at 6 in the morning because the light is best at 6 in the morning and because the house was quiet and because the dress was finally coming together the way I had been trying to make it come together for 3 months. The Star Dream collection. Every stitch of it was mine. Every choice, the constellation beading, the illusion neckline, the way the train moved like water when you walked, came from my hands and my hours and my particular way of seeing the world. I overheard the conversation by accident. I want to be clear about that because it matters. It was not snooping, it was not suspicion, it was just the bad luck of being in the wrong hallway at the right moment. Vanessa Shaw's voice, low and precise. The exhibition is in 2 weeks. The design needs to be credited to me. We've talked about this. And then a pause. And then Marcus's voice, quieter, I'll handle it. I'll handle it. I stood in that hallway for what felt like a very long time. And then I did something that surprised even me. I did not confront anyone. I did not ask for an explanation. I went back to my drafting table and I sat down and I opened a new document on my laptop and I typed one line at the top. What they took. What it was worth. What happens next? People think revenge begins with anger. Mine began with a spreadsheet. The documentation phase took 11 days. I worked at night, after the house went quiet, with a small lamp and a cup of tea that went cold every time because I kept forgetting to drink it. I documented every design, every concept, every sketch I had produced under the Grayson family's roof, with dates and dimensions and comparable market valuations. I documented the $32,000 in services absorbed into the household budget without a single acknowledgement. I documented the Star Dream dress in particular, 32 pages of process documentation, time-stamped photographs of the sketches, fabric samples with my handwriting on the labels, a development timeline that started 4 months ago and ended 3 weeks before the exhibition. When the total hit $158,000 and I just sat there staring at that number for a full minute, I understood something that I had been circling around for years without being able to name it. I had not been ungrateful. I had not been difficult. I had been working. Constantly, quietly, invisibly working, and every dollar of that work had been absorbed into a family that looked at me and saw a girl who should be grateful just to be there. They thought my silence meant I had nothing. Every single night, I was counting. I printed the packet the night before the exhibition. 64 pages. Organized into 4 sections, original work documentation, household service valuation, the Star Dream file, and a 4th section I labeled simply, What Comes Next. The cover page had no decoration. Just the date. Just my name. I put it in a brown envelope. I put the envelope in the lining of my winter coat. And I went to the exhibition. You know what happened at the exhibition. Vanessa Shaw stood on that stage in the cream and gold gown that I had breathed into existence, and she thanked the people who had inspired her, and she accepted applause that belonged to me, and I stood in the crowd and I took one photograph. Just one. The stage, the dress, her face in the light. I needed it for the packet. And I needed to see it, really see it, so that when people asked me later if I was sure, if I really understood what I was doing, I would have something to point to. Something that said, yes. I saw it. I was there. I left before the reception. On the way out, one of the event staff asked if I was all right. I said, I've never been more fine in my life. Then I got in my car and I drove away. The machine started failing the way expensive things always do, quietly, then all at once. The first crack came on a Monday, 8 days after the exhibition. Grayson Enterprises' capital chain broke. Not a slow erosion, a break. The specific mechanism was a failed investment negotiation that had been quietly dependent on the Shaw family's financial backing, and that backing had been dependent on a marriage agreement between Marcus and Vanessa Shaw, and that marriage agreement had been dependent on everyone believing that the Grayson family was a stable, prestigious household worth marrying into. The Shaw family deal alone had been valued at $42 million in projected capital. Every cent of it evaporated when the structure underneath it started shifting. I was not in that house anymore. I had moved out the morning after the exhibition with 2 suitcases and the brown envelope and the framed original sketch of the star dream dress that I had taken down from the wall of my room. They had hung it there as decoration. I had let them. Until the morning I took it back. The call came at 9:47 that Monday morning. It was one of the household staff, a woman who had been kind to me over the years and who genuinely thought she was doing me a favor. She said, "Melissa, things are bad here. Marcus is asking if you can come back and talk." I said, "Tell him I moved." Then I hung up. That was the first call. There were more. The second failure came on Wednesday of the same week. A major client, a fashion house that had been in quiet negotiations with Grayson Enterprises for 6 months, sent a formal withdrawal of interest. The reason cited in their letter was a concern about the authenticity of the design work associated with the Grayson family's recent exhibition entry. Someone had submitted a formal complaint to the exhibition committee. I did not submit it. But I had sent the packet, all 64 pages, to the committee president's office 7 days earlier, by certified mail, with a cover letter that was exactly 3 sentences long. I received their reply on Thursday. They were investigating. The third failure came the following Monday. Vanessa Shaw's exhibition entry was withdrawn pending review. The announcement was 1 paragraph on the committee's website. In the circles where these things matter, 1 paragraph is enough. I know because I started receiving messages from designers I had worked with years before, people I hadn't spoken to in months, asking if it was true, asking if I had filed the complaint, asking how they could help. I said the same thing to all of them: the committee has everything they need. Thank you. That was their second mistake. They thought stealing from me was a private transaction. The fourth failure came 2 weeks later. And this one was not about the dress. This one was about Gerald Grayson, the family patriarch, Marcus's father, the man who had run Grayson Enterprises for 30 years with the specific authority of someone who had never been seriously questioned. What I had documented, what had been confirmed by a private investigator I had hired using the last $4,200 of my personal savings, was this: the car accident that killed my parents was not an accident. Gerald had arranged it. My father had been involved in a technology dispute with Grayson Enterprises, a dispute about intellectual property, about research my father had developed that Gerald wanted and could not get through legitimate channels. So he got it another way. On a Thursday evening in November, 11 years ago. And then he brought home the orphan child of the man he had destroyed and raised her in the house he had cleared out for himself by destroying her family. The number on that line of the accounting was not dollars. It was everything. That word, everything. Remember it. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday afternoon at a restaurant in the business district, floor-to-ceiling glass windows, terrace visible from the street, enough foot traffic that what happened inside would not stay contained. I chose the location. I arrived 20 minutes early. I ordered coffee and I sat with the brown envelope on the table in front of me and I waited. Gerald Grayson arrived with 2 associates, which told me he had decided this was a business meeting. He sat across from me and he used the voice he saved for board meetings and lawyers, measured, generous, faintly amused. He said, "Melissa, you've been busy." I pushed the envelope across the table. I said, "Everything is organized by section." Then I folded my hands and I waited. He opened it the way powerful men open things, like the pace of his attention is itself a form of authority. He read the cover page. He turned to section 1. He spent 4 minutes on the design documentation. I watched his face move through 3 expressions: dismissal, recalculation, and then something that was not quite fear but was very close to it. He said, "These claims are not substantiated." I said, "Section 4. He turned to Section 4. Section 4 contained the investigation results. The original accident report. The documents. The recorded phone call from 11 years ago, the one his assistant had made on his behalf, the one my godfather had saved on a backup drive for a decade before I went looking for it. He read for 6 minutes without speaking. The associates shifted in their chairs. A woman at the next table was telling someone about her vacation. He closed the packet. He said, and this is the moment his language shifted from authority to calculation, "What do you want?" Not a question. I said, "The design credits, corrected in writing, before Friday. The financial settlement of $158,000 for the household services, itemized as I have presented them. And a full, documented account of what happened to my parents, submitted to the police." I paused. "Those are not negotiations. They are the terms." He said, "You can't prove the accident." I said, "Section 4, page 31. He looked at me for a long time. I looked back. I did not fidget. I did not soften. I had been in that family for 11 years and I knew exactly what his face looked like when he was deciding whether a problem could be managed. I watched him conclude that it could not. He said, "I need time." I stood up. I said, "You have 48 hours before the documentation goes to the police independently. I've already arranged it." Then I picked up my coat and I walked out through the glass doors and into the afternoon and I did not look back. The collapse happened in installments over the following 6 weeks. Week 1, Gerald submitted a formal credit correction to the exhibition committee, acknowledging Melissa as the original designer of the Star Dream collection. The committee published the correction. The fashion house that had withdrawn from negotiations quietly reached back out, to me directly, not to Grayson Enterprises. Week 2, Grayson Enterprises lost 2 major accounts in 4 days. Clients who had been watching the situation and decided, with the pragmatism that money teaches, that the association was no longer valuable. The $42 million Shaw family deal was officially dead. Marcus and Vanessa's planned marriage collapsed. I did not arrange that particular collapse. It arranged itself, the way certain things do when the structure underneath them is removed. Week 3, Vanessa Shaw was formally disqualified from the exhibition. Her previous submissions were under review. She retained a lawyer. The outcome was not favorable. Week 4, Gerald submitted a statement to the police. I will not say it was voluntary. It was the choice he made when the alternative became clear to him. The investigation was opened. Week 5, Marcus called from a number I didn't recognize. I answered because I recognized the silence before he spoke, that specific quality of someone who has rehearsed something and then lost the rehearsal the moment the line connected. He said, "I knew about the dress. I should have stopped it. I didn't." A pause. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I knew." I said, "I know you knew." Another pause. Longer. He said, "Is there anything?" I said, "No." Then I said, "I hope you figure out what you actually want, Marcus, before you use someone else up trying to decide." Then I ended the call. That is the only grace I had available. A limited thing. An incomplete thing. But real. Every family has a person it assigns to absorb everything, the instability, the silence, the consequences no one else wants to carry. That person keeps the family functional. Not healthy. Not honest. Just functional. The moment that person stops absorbing, there is nowhere for the poison to go. It spreads upward. It touches everything. You can call it revenge if you want. But it is not revenge. It is just what happens to a structure when you remove the thing that was quietly holding it up. I was that thing. For 11 years. I stopped being it on the morning I drove away with 2 suitcases and a brown envelope and a framed sketch that told the complete truth of what my silence had been worth. The last call came on a Sunday evening. Gerald. Unknown number. He sounded smaller than I had ever heard him, not because he had become humble, but because the architecture of his authority had been genuinely dismantled. He had nothing left to manage the conversation with. He said he had something of mine. Something that had belonged to my mother. A small piece of jewelry she had been wearing the night of the accident, catalogued in the original report, sitting in a box in his house for 11 years. He offered to return it. I said, "You can mail it." It arrived Wednesday in a padded envelope with no note. I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time before I opened it. It was a small silver bracelet with one word engraved on the inside, light. I did not know my mother well enough to know if she had chosen it herself or if someone had given it to her or what she had thought it meant. I only knew it was hers. That it had been in that house for 11 years. And that now it was in my hands. I laughed first. Then something else. Then I went and bought a small frame and I laid the bracelet against white paper and closed the glass over it and put it on the shelf next to the framed star dream sketch. My mother's bracelet. My design. 2 things that had been taken. Both returned. That is the shelf I look at when I need to remember why I did what I did. I am telling you this story from a studio I rent with money I earned myself, in a city I chose, doing work that has my name on it. The fashion house that reached out after the credit correction offered me a contract. I signed it after reading every line 3 times with my own lawyer present, which is a habit I have now and intend to keep. The Star Dream dress was exhibited under my name at a show last spring. I was there. I stood in the room and I watched people look at it and I did not think about the Grayson family or the hallway or the cold drafts or the 11 years. I thought about the 6 in the morning light and the tea that kept going cold and the way the train moves like water when you walk. The trap I escaped was the belief that being chosen, being kept, was the same thing as being valued. It is not. It has never been. People keep what is useful. People value what cannot be replaced. I spent 11 years being kept. I spent the next chapter learning what it felt like to be irreplaceable, not to them, but to myself. which is the only accounting that actually matters. Gerald Grayson's greatest mistake was not taking my parents' research. It was raising the one person who understood exactly what had been taken, and then handing her 11 years of uninterrupted time to learn how to take it back. He forgot that the person doing the building always knows what she made. And she always knows exactly what it was worth,